Hello there, welcome once again to our science lesson. Remember, we are looking at communities and their environments. We have just said that the environment is divided into two. We have the abiotic and biotic. So the abiotic environment is the one that is physical, that has no life, and it is inclusive of factors that influence weather and climate. For instance, temperature, rainfall, wind, and humidity, and the rest like pH and salinity. So we have already gone through those factors and found out how they can influence distribution of living organisms. We have said living organisms can only be found or able to survive in ecosystems where those factors are able to support the life of flora and fauna. So we have some few questions just to help us as we wind up on the same. One of the questions that you can easily maybe get an answer is this: explain why lowlands. Explain why lowlands have as high biological diversity than highlands. So our answer here we get from the biotic factor air pressure. So from this we are able to find out that air pressure varies with altitude. Remember, altitude is the height above sea level. So we found out that at high altitude, like mountains or highlands, not mountains, high altitude, mountains or highlands, we expect low air pressure. And pressure affects amount of gases, important of them, oxygen and carbon dioxide. So we expect low amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen gas in high altitude areas due to low air pressure. So because of that, we shall have less of processes that are supported by both carbon dioxide and oxygen. Those processes, we know them: photosynthetic process, photosynthesis, and respiration. So we shall have low photosynthetic and respiratory rates in high altitude area because it has low air pressure, leading to low amount of gases. So because of that, then we shall have, is going to support fewer animals, fewer plants, fewer animals, and the vice versa is true for low altitude areas. So we expect in low altitude areas, like now the lowlands, low altitude areas, the highland, that is the opposite, highlands. Lowlands, we expect high air pressure, and because of that we shall have more carbon dioxide and more oxygen, more photosynthetic rates, respiratory rates, more animals, and more plants. Then question 2, identify instruments that can be used. Identify instruments that can be used to measure the following parameters. Or the following biotic factors. We have looked at wind speed, different aspects of wind speed. Now this is science at a lower level, wind speed. We use an anemometer. It is important that we know how we get the parameters. If it is wind, humidity, how are you going to get it? So that you can gauge if that humidity or that wind is affecting the activity or distribution of living organisms. So we have wind speed, an anemometer. Other aspects of wind, we have wind strength. We know how we can get that wind strength, windsock. Aspects of wind, wind direction, wind vane. All this you can get in a meteorological station. We have others like temperature. You know how to how to measure temperature. You are going to use thermometer. But we have different types of thermometer. But for the case of the ecosystem temperature or air temperature, we use maximum and minimum thermometer. Maximum stroke minimum thermometer. And then we have humidity. Humidity, we use hydrometer. We have oxygen concentration. Oxygen concentration. Oxygen concentration, maybe that could be the only new instrument. We use a J tube with pyrogallic acid. So it's able to absorb oxygen from the atmosphere. And then the parameter is indicated on the meter. So pyrogallic is a chemical that has high affinity for oxygen. It absorbs oxygen from the atmosphere. Then we have air pressure. Air pressure. This is measured using a barometer. And then light penetration through water, which is now called turbidity. Turbidity is measured by use of a Secchi disc. Maybe this is the only, again, a new instrument maybe coming across. A Secchi disc is simply a circular structure, and on that structure we have a circular plate. It has divisions, and on each division is marked white and black. So assume that is the black part where I'm doing the crosses. The remaining part is black, and then a string is attached on it. And then now you descend the disc into water. So this is how you can do it. Once you get a Secchi disc, you can do it by yourself. If that is the string, you can have that. And then now if that's the water body, you release the disc into water by holding the string, and then you observe the point where it just disappears. Again, you can now start pulling it up from the water until it just reappears. Then now put a ruler up to the Secchi disc, or a means of measuring. Then now you can find out the level of water to that point, and then read that measurement. That becomes the ability of light to penetrate through that water body. So that is measuring turbidity. And then we have others like pH. pH, we use pH meter, or you can use universal indicator. Universal indicator. Universal indicator. And the last part is light intensity. Light intensity. Light intensity, we use light meter. We use light meter. Then question number 3, before we go to biotic factors, is biotic factors can be divided into chemical and physical factors. So use a table to classify. Use a table to classify them into two. So we shall have a table, one side physical, the other one chemical. We can use this space here, physical factors and chemical factors. So chemical factors, you can easily identify them. The one that maybe you are going to use chemicals to identify them, or they may result to changes in the chemical composition of the ecosystem. So one of them could be oxygen. Oxygen. So oxygen is a chemical factor because of the chemical element involved, oxygen. And again, oxygen, we know that it's an oxidizing agent. It can react with other elements in the ecosystem to form other compounds. pH. We have talked of measuring pH using universal indicator. Universal indicator is a combination of chemicals. So to get the pH, we can classify pH as either acidic, neutral, or alkaline. That one is chemical. Then you can also look at salt concentration. Salt concentration. Salt concentration. Or salinity. So salinity is a chemical factor because the salts that usually change in the concentration or the solid concentration of the ecosystem are due to chemical compounds like calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, and several others. And then mineral ions. Mineral ions. So this can also be part of the abiotic environment affecting distribution of living organisms. So the rest of the factors, the abiotic factors, will fall into physical category. For example, rainfall, precipitation. So this is a physical factor. We have temperature, does not involve chemical components, therefore is physical. We have humidity. This is a physical component. And then we have air pressure. Air pressure. No chemical elements are involved. And then we also have wind. Wind, the speed, the strength, the direction. So these are the categories of abiotic factors. So the other concept of environment, B, is biotic environment. Biotic environment. So our aim again is to find out how does biotic environment affect distribution, abundance, and locality of organisms. So we have already found out that biotic environment are those living organisms in the environment that will affect distribution of themselves and distribution of other organisms. Are living organisms in the environment. But as these living organisms are living in the environment, they are going to interact with each other. And how their interaction. So there will be interaction among the living organisms, and how the interaction lead to different relationships. So here, when you talk of relationships, is going to find out how do they relate. Does one organism interacting with another organism, either of the same species or different species, does it affect their population? Does it affect the ecosystem, which in turn affect how the organism live? We are going to find out the kind of relationships that will exist. So these are living organisms, the interaction in the ecosystem, and producing special, different relationships. These relationships are special. They are special in that they will affect distribution, they will affect richness, abundance, and locality of the organisms. Biodiversity of these organisms are going to be affected by these relationships. So the question is, what are some of these relationships that are produced from the interaction between organism and the environment and among themselves? So some of the relationships that arises include, we have predation. We are going to find out the meaning of that. We have relationships like parasitism. We have competition. We shall find out what brings about competition, how organisms are going to compete. We shall also find out relationships like symbiosis. We have others like disease-host interactions. In other words, does disease or malfunctioning of parts of an organism affect its distribution, its survival, we are going to find out how that one affects living organisms. And then others like pollination. So we shall pick each one of them and we go through the concept and find out what kind of relationship is this? How do the organisms interact in any of those relationships? And does it have an effect on distribution of organism or their survival or their abundance and the kind of habitat they are going to live in? So the first one here, we look at predation. Now, this is not a very new term. The word itself comes from one of or a classification of organism. For instance, here, if you look at the first, if you just remove the I or N, what comes into your mind is the word predator. Predator. Now, what is a predator? A predator is an organism that feeds on another organism, and most of the time, the one that's fed on is a herbivore. So, that organism that's fed on, being a herbivore or aggressor, is called a prey. So we are going to have a predator, an organism that will feed on another organism called the prey. The prey is most of the time aggressor or a herbivore. So the predator here feeding on another animal, we shall say is a carnivore. So most is a carnivore. So classification here of a predator should be a carnivore. Our prey here, being another organism, is a herbivore. So, in essence, predation is a predator-prey relationship where a carnivore feeds on another organism called the herbivore. And you know the role of feeding, nutrition, to obtain nutrients from this. So that predator-prey relationship is what we call predation, is a predator-prey relationship, where predator obtains nutrients. So the role of feeding obtains nutrients from the prey. Obtains nutrients from the prey. How? By feeding. This one must be clear, by feeding. Because in other situations we shall find an organism obtaining nutrients from another organism, but we cannot classify them or classify it as a predator or predation kind of relationship. So by feeding on either the wall of that prey or that organism or part of the organism. So for this to happen, it's a very interesting relationship. The predator must be able to hunt down the prey to feed on it. Sometimes, most of the predators kill their prey, the lion, the leopard. First thing they do is killing their prey. That's why if they get a dead animal, it's not very easy for a lion to feed on a carcass, a dead animal, because it must hunt down and feed on it while it is fresh. The only carnivore that is under predation again that can feed on dead animals, mainly the vulture at the tertiary level of the trophic level, and sometimes the hyena. Hyena sometimes they display very interesting characteristics. They can even start feeding on another live organism. Like I've watched on geographic videos where a buffalo, when it gets stuck in mud or in a swamp, hyena starts to feed on it while it is still alive. That one does not happen with lion, with the first class, the second class carnivores, that is, the lion, the leopard, the tiger. They have to kill the animal first. So predation, a predator is feeding on a prey to obtain nutrients, either wholly or partly. So the question is, in our country or in your country, Australia, what are some of the examples of predators and prey? Examples of predators. Examples of predators, they could be many. We have feral cats. Feral cats. We came across that word, feral, when you are looking at invasive species or invasive animals. A feral animal is the one that was once a domestic animal, but it ran into the wild and becomes a wild animal. We have the foxes. We have the crocodiles, snakes. We have snakes. And then we have a spotted tail, quillo, spotted tail, quillo, or a quill. And then the other one is the dingo. So foxes are common to identify. Crocodiles, we know they are carnivores or they are predators. So they are the one that will feed on other herbivores. Herbivores, we have several examples of them. So examples of prey are common, like the rabbits. Remember the European rabbits that were introduced? And then we have even the one that are domesticated, the cattle, and several others. But the most important thing as we look at examples is how a predator-prey interact. So before you go there, we look at predator-prey cycles. Prey cycles. So in other words, if we have a predator X, predator X in an ecosystem, or it's introduced into the same ecosystem with prey Y. Now suppose the number of this organism, let us just say the predator, there are 10 of them, and the prey, we suppose the number is 35, because always the predator are supposed to be low in number as compared to the prey to support that relationship. This number 10 and 35 will not be, it's not going to remain constant. It does not remain constant. It can't remain constant. It can't be a constant. Why? Because with time, you realize that the population of predator and prey is going to change. So if the prey is given all the conditions for reproduction, what will happen? The number will go up. It might go up, let us say after 1 month, if they reproduce very fast, or let us give it some 2-3 months, it would have gone to maybe, let us say, 60. So as it goes up, again, predator will have enough supply of food. When it gets enough supply of food, the number will not remain constant. It will go maybe to 20. It will even increase further. But as the number of predator increases, which means more of the prey will again be fed on. So it will drop slightly, maybe 45. It can't go back to 35. But as the prey, again, population goes down, we expect the predator population to go down. If it was 20, it might go back to 17, something like that. And the circle continues. So realize that there's always a circle, or there's always a rise and fall in population of both the predator and prey as they continue living in the same ecosystem. That's why we are saying the number can never be constant. But the question is, why do we have this rise and fall? Why is it that prey at one time, it's like it's able to produce very well? It means it is avoiding. It is now able to escape very well, finding reproductive conditions and able to reproduce to the numbers that we have just mentioned, up to 60. For it to do that, it must produce features that will enable it hide from the predators. Such features, we call them adaptations. So both the prey and predator, there will always be a circle of rising and falling. After falling again, it goes back. Not to the same, but maybe higher a little bit, like that. So for them to do that, the rise and fall is because either the prey is avoiding the predator, and at the same time, the predator is able to hunt down the prey for purpose of food. So for that one to happen, we must have this phenomenon, adaptation. So they usually produce different kind of adaptations for them to survive each other. It should be remembered that the predator is not supposed to clear all the prey. Suppose all the prey is cleared. Let us look at a lion. Lions in a game reserve, it clears all the antelopes. If it clears all the antelope, it will lack food. Suppose this is the exclusive food, there's no any other source. Then the lion will be in trouble. It's going to lack food and it's going to die. So there must be a balance between the predator and prey so that they can survive. That balance is brought about by adaptation. So before we look at examples of adaptation, we can just a little bit say something about this prey-predator cycles. So we have said population of predator and prey usually rises and falls. Rises and falls. So in the process, it produces distinct patterns, producing distinct patterns. But we have already said that in that circle, the population of predator is supposed to be lower and the population of prey is supposed to be higher. So we are going to use a graph just to show that. And again, it must be the curve for predator is supposed to be behind, following the curve of the prey. If we introduce some few rabbits in already highly infested ecosystem with foxes, they can't survive. So you introduce, if you have to do the experiment very well, you are going to introduce rabbits in that ecosystem, they get adapted, and then you release some few foxes there to study the predation cycles. So let us use this graph just to illustrate the circles we are talking about. Now, on this axis, you're going to put their time. Now, time is variable depending on the type of species that you are looking at. If they reproduce very fast, it could be months. If they take slightly longer, 1 year to reproduce, then you can talk of years. So time can vary. And then here, population. We put population on y-axis, population of both predator and prey. So in this case, we are going to use an example that has been studied, the snowshoe hare or rabbits, and a herbivore or carnivore, that is the lynx. So time, I've said, is varied. So suppose we are going to use this, our graph here. Let us suppose that one is the graph of the carnivore, the graph of the hare. Maybe there were few while they were introduced. They're supposed to be more like that. So there's a general trend for the two. Let me label that one as the snowshoe. The snowshoe hare. And the lower curve for lynx. So you can see that is the prey, that is the predator. The curve for the prey is showing more numbers than the curve for the predator. We cannot have that curve of the lynx up there because it means lynx will be high in number or in greater number than the snowshoe. So it's going to clear the hares, the prey. That one will create an imbalance, what we call an ecological imbalance. So there must be a balance such that the population of predator is lower than the population of the prey. So the prey, higher number, and then the predator, lower numbers. So as the population of snowshoe hare increases, population of the lynx also increases. But when it increases, when lynx increases, it will feed more on more of the hares, and in the process, the population is going to drop even further. But again, it will adapt and then it goes back. So we are going to have a rise and fall of the same. But we have said the population of, if you look at the peaks, this is the peak for the peak X for the prey, and the peak for, let us say, the Y for the predator is always lower. That's why the prey must always be more in number and predators slightly lower in number, but they always oscillate together. So we are saying the oscillation together, or rise and fall, creating this distinct pattern, is due to a balance. A balance. So there must be a balance between the population of the predator and prey. How is that balance brought about? Is brought about through adaptations. Adaptation. So snowshoe hare will have its own adaptation to avoid the predator. But again, the predator should not stay hungry for a longer time. It's going to die. It must also produce adaptations that enable it to catch the hare. So we are going to look at some few adaptations of each as we move on. Adaptations, general adaptations of the predator. So why should a predator produce adaptation? So that it can be able to catch and be able to feed on the prey. Let us look at a predator, for instance, the lion. So what are some of the adaptation of the lion? Now, the lion, most of the time, they'll hunt in savanna grasslands. And savanna grasslands, most of the time for hunting period is when it is dry. The color of, the skin color of the lion is close to the color of the grass when it is dry. So it's like the color of the skin of the lion is resembling the background, the grass. So in the process, the prey cannot easily spot the lion. So that phenomena is called camouflage. Camouflage. So one adaptation the predator are going to produce is through camouflaging. So what is camouflaging? I've said where the coverings of the predator in form of skin, in this case, predator resembles the background. This is important so that the prey cannot easily spot the predator, and in the process it can easily ambush if it's a flock of antelopes, and then it can easily catch them. Again, sometimes the ambush does not work, so it has to run after the prey. For it to do that, it has to run fast. For it to run fast, the limbs, the hind limbs are supposed to be strong. Strong hind limbs. Strong hind limbs. So most of the predators have strong hind limbs to run fast. To run very fast. And then also predators usually have sharp eyesight and sense of smell. Sharp eyesight. For instance, the hawk, the vultures, eyesight and sense of smell. This is to detect the presence of the prey very easily. Presence of prey, even from a long distance. From a long distance. And then others include, like the lion and the leopard, their forelimbs have sharp claws. Sharp claws. The role is for it to easily capture the prey. To easily capture the prey. So there are several, but the most salient of them include what we have indicated on the board. So it is not just that predators are the ones that will have adaptation to have an advantage over the prey. Again, prey has its own adaptation. Adaptation of the prey. Because if it cannot have adaptation to avoid the predator, not exclusively, but if it is 80% chances, then the prey will be cleared. But that one does not happen in a well-balanced ecosystem. So it means the antelope, in this case, if we are going to use that example, must produce some adaptations. So again, you realize that again also in terms of sight and also sense of smell, it has high sense of smell to detect presence of the prey. High sense of smell to detect presence of predator from a distance. From a distance. This is important. Antelopes, when they are grazing in a herd, you realize that they are going to, sometimes they are able to detect by use of smell, by use of their eyes, that a lion or any other predator is coming. And then they also produce nearly the same adaptive features, camouflaging. Most of the time, they'll be found in dry grassland if it's an antelope, so that they cannot be easily spotted by the prey. We have already explained this concept. And then we have other phenomena of adaptation like mimicry. Mimicry is where organisms or the prey will resemble inedible objects. The prey resembles inanimate, inedible objects. Inedible objects. So when a predator sees something or an object that looks like it's not an animal, then it just passes it. For instance, we have an organism like the stick insect. It resembles a twig. Which animal will want to feed, or which predator will want to feed on a twig? And yet it is looking for a fresh organism with blood, maybe if it is the higher mammals. Look at some moth. Some moth resemble bees. And we know that moths mostly are predated on by birds. Birds rarely dare to eat the bees because of the stings. So if a moth is resembling bee, an insect is resembling a twig, then to the predator is inedible object. It is inanimate object. So in the process, it is just passed on or over. And then again, very common, if you have watched geographic videos, you realize that most of the herbivores that form the prey usually graze in herds, graze in bands of very many animals in herds, so that they can be able to fight off the predator. So when a lion comes close to a herd of zebras, all of them are looking similar, or buffaloes. It becomes very difficult for the lion to pick the weakest buffalo or the weakest zebra so that it can go after it. In fact, if you look at the videos carefully, a lion will rush into a herd of zebras so that it can now separate one or two of them, and then it's able to target it until it's able to catch it. In the form of a band, in form of herds, it becomes very difficult for the predator to kill or to identify the weak so that it can go for it. So, in essence, how does it affect distribution of these organisms? So we realize that predators will be found where we have suitable prey. Where we have suitable prey. So we cannot expect a predator like maybe crocodile to come on land to hunt the prey. It cannot be able to get any, it cannot be able to catch any. So it will go into water where we have suitable prey. So that predator-prey relationship is affecting the distribution. Where we have more prey for a given predator, then we expect high number of the predators. So as we finish on predation, we can look at one or two questions. One, what is predator-prey relationship? Predator-prey relationship. So we have already said a predator-prey relationship is where an organism called a predator, which is in this case a carnivore, feeds on another organism called the prey, and in this case mostly is a herbivore, to obtain nutrients, either the woolly part of the wall of the organism or part of that organism. So a carnivore is feeding on a herbivore to obtain nutrients. So it could be eating the whole of it or part of that prey. We call that one predator-prey relationship. And we have said is the one that produces the term predation. The other question, number 2, name some native Australian predators. Name native Australian predators and introduced predators. So we can do a small table here where we have native and introduced. Native and introduced. So the native one, we have already mentioned some of them, like the dingo. Dingo is believed to have been introduced into Australia so many years, because of very many years, almost 6,000 years ago, it has become the native. Then we have the spotted tail quail. We have crocodiles, foxes, and feral cats. The feral cats. Introduced one, we have the brown snake and the parentis. The parentis. Then the last question, not even the last, the third one. State three state three importance of predation. The importance of predation. The importance of predation. So what is the importance in terms of ecological balance? What benefit will it be to the ecosystem if lions are feeding on antelopes? If that's the example you may use. Or if the foxes are feeding on rabbits or hares, or the lynx feeding on snowshoe rabbits. So one of them is to reduce the population of prey to carrying capacity of the ecosystem. Reduces population of the prey to carrying capacity. Carrying capacity of the ecosystem. Of the ecosystem. So when you talk of carrying capacity is the ability of the ecosystem to support the population of organisms that have been either introduced or that are native to it. So that's the carrying capacity without depleting resources any further. So if it is 1 acre of land, then it means we need some limited number of organisms so that now the ecosystem cannot be destroyed. We call that one carrying capacity. The maximum number of organisms that can be comfortably be supported by a given ecosystem without depleting the resources. So predators will reduce the size or population size of the prey to carrying capacity. Because if the population of the prey will be left unchecked, it will go beyond the ability of the ecosystem to support the same prey. And that one can lead to either destroying the environment. We have found in areas where we have high number of livestock, the animals usually graze the field clean, and in the process it allows other destructive processes like destruction of habitats for other organisms, soil erosion process comes in, and it's going to affect several other things. It's going to even interfere further with ecological balance. So it reduces population of the prey to carrying capacity of the ecosystem. And then another role of predation is to improve quality of the organisms. In other words, maintaining quality, maintains quality of the prey. So in a herd of prey, collection of several of them, you'll realize that some could be sick, some could be weak. When the lion is hunting for the antelope, it usually most of the time targets the weak, the one that cannot run very fast, the one that is sick. So in the process, if that is going to go on and on, you realize that the prey or the population of the prey that remains will be mostly made up of the stronger antelopes, the one that can be able to survive the runs from the lion, the runs from the foxes. So in the process, it's maintaining quality. It is removing the weaker ones, are getting removed from the population. And then the other one is maintaining diversity. Maintains diversity. Diversity means variety. maintains variety of the same prey. So if you are going to have a prey, maybe A, B, some species, antelope, the hares, the zebras. So it has acted on antelope, it has removed the weak ones. So the one that will be remaining, it will become very difficult for the lion to get them because they can run, they can be able to detect the lion coming, they're able to escape from the predators. So it will go to another species, maybe zebra. The same happens. Maybe it goes to the buffaloes. The same happens. And then now, the high qualities of A, B, C, they will now start proliferating or even increasing in population because whatever that has remained or that's being passed on to their offsprings within A, B, or C of the species that we have mentioned as prey can be able to survive the predators or can be able to survive predation. So diversity will be maintained. It's not now possible to kill all of them because it will be taking a lot of strategies for the lion to kill even one of them, if it is zebra, if it is among the buffaloes, if it's among the antelopes. It is maintaining diversity. The following graph shows the hypothetical population the following graph shows two hypothetical population, two hypothetical populations of a predator and prey. Of predator and prey. So the graph is here. Graph is here. Time on this axis, x-axis, and then population on this y-axis. So the graphs are as follows. And then now this is species Y and species X. So the question is, which species is the prey and which one is the predator species? Which one will be the prey and which one will be the predator? Now, from our previous, what we have just looked at, the population of the predator should always be below the maximum. Population should always be lower than the population of the prey. Prey will always have the highest peak. So from this, we can find out the highest peak, the one that is above, the graph that is above the rest, above the other. So our peak is here and happens to be species Y. Therefore, species Y here becomes the prey, and species X becomes the predator. We have said this is important for purpose of balance. Otherwise, if the predators are more than the prey, there will be an ecological imbalance. Predator will clear all the prey, and it will create more problems. Then that was part A. Part A was which species is prey, which one is a predator. So we have said predator is species X, prey is species Y. With the reasons, the population of prey must always be higher than the population of the predators. The other question is, describe the relationship pattern between the relationship pattern. So the word there is pattern. The relationship, the pattern between the prey and the predator. So there's something here, especially from this point. As the number of prey increases, as we have already mentioned, the number of species X increases, also the population of species Y or species X increases. And then again, decrease of X of Y leads to decrease in X. So that's the relationship one. We are realizing that as the population of prey increases, population of the predator also decreases. But there's also something else about the number of prey and predators. So briefly, I can just point here that increase in population of X, there will be an increase in population of Y. Something else about the total number of each. You realize that the peak of prey is up there, and then the peak of predator is down here. If you use values, the predators will be lower in number, prey will be higher in number. So we have more prey than predator. So that's what we can note. That's what we can note from there. We have more prey than predators. As the number of prey increases, number of predator also increases. Something else is also how the population follows each other. If you look at this, the time lapses. If we get that point, time lapses. To show that predator depends on prey, the prey will come later after the prey. So the curve of the predators always follow the curve or comes after the curve of the prey. That is the predator coming after the curve of the prey, which means if this is a month like October, we need the prey first in that ecosystem so that now it can attract in December. In December, it can attract the predators. So it is the prey that will get first into the ecosystem, establish itself, adapt, and then now attract the predators. So with this question, I think we can easily understand the circles where we have rise and fall in the population of prey and predators. We have other questions that we shall look at in our next lesson. Thank you for being alert.